What's up, family? Thank you for tuning in to the Dream Nation podcast. My name is Casanova. I'll be your host, and I'm excited to be bringing to you entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and trailblazers from around the world. Stay locked in with us because we're about to go on a journey that will change your life. What's up, Dream Nation? Casanova here today, and I'm excited because we have somebody on the line that's going to teach us a lot about not only building our character, but I think our communication skills. And at a time that we're living in right now, I think nothing is more important than understanding how to communicate. We can't communicate face-to-face, which is what the norm is. So I think us being able to figure out how we can communicate in different ways, but still be just as effective is going to help us all in the long run. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and I want to get right into it. Today on the line, we have Mr. Arman Chowdhury. Is that how I say the last name? Or tell me how?
So yeah, you could say Chowdhury. Another way to say it is Chowdhury.
Chowdhury.
Two very popular ways, yes.
Got it. All right, I love it. Well, my apologies if I kind of butchered it a little bit. I know on the front end, what's crazy is my name is not that hard to spell or pronounce, but you wouldn't believe how many people butcher it. So yeah, man, so I'm excited to have you on here. I know that you've been crushing it when it comes to leadership and communication skills and being able to teach people how that they can really have charisma and let that charisma shine. And so this is something that I've seen on your YouTube. This is something that I've seen on your Twitter. And so I want you to dive into that today. But before we get started into that, I always like to think of us as entrepreneurs just like superheroes. And today more than ever, because we're flying around, we're wearing a lot of capes, right? We're trying to solve a lot of different problems. So before you started teaching all these leadership skills and communication skills, and before you had this big following and big tribe of people that you help, tell me, if we could go back to when you were just a young boy, who is Arman?
Great question, bro. And thank you for having me on. So basically, all the way from the beginning, I grew up in Bangladesh, and I grew up in the villages, you could say Dhaka, Chittagong area. And I was always the very traditional wild boy. I was getting very lit. I was having a lot of fun. And that was my lifestyle in Bangladesh. But eventually, I transitioned into the US when I was 5 years old. Okay. And by the time that I came to the US, I mean, the culture, it was completely different. So by the time I was in the US, I had a little transition in personality, or you could say a very big transition. I went from being the very wild boy to being the very shy kid.
Got it.
Yeah, so I was very shy growing up because I wasn't too confident in the way that I sounded. I had a strong accent, and I would just stretch out different words. And I was basically like that for the next couple of years. And around that time, I was thinking about just being an engineer. I was a very analytical engineering kind of guy. And you know what they say about most engineers? They're very, there's the term awkward engineer, like that they lack communication skills, etc. So by the time I was in College of Engineering, a part of me started to wake up a little bit. I was like, everyone in this engineering program, they just sort of accept being poor at communication skills. I wouldn't say all engineers are, but in that department, a lot of people just kind of were fixed in their ways. And I wanted to see if there was a way to change the personality. That's when I started discovering Toastmasters, which is a public speaking club, and basically started to delve into Toastmasters. And I was able to learn that public speaking and communication skills, it's just like any skill set out there. You can learn it, you can practice it, and you can eventually master it. And that's when I started to delve a little bit more into engineering and into communication worlds and try to combine them.
Got it.
Yes, since then I started ArmaniTalks, and initially I was focused on helping engineers develop their communication skills, and nowadays I've expanded onto entrepreneurs as well.
Got it. I love it. Now, there's a lot to unpack there. And the first thing I want to ask is, you said that, you went from being a wild boy to then you were almost a shy boy. And how much of that do you think that it contributed to you being in a new environment? And the reason why I ask that is because there's a lot of people, maybe even that they're grown, that they get a new job or they're starting, a new career, or maybe they're in a new town, and yet now they don't feel as comfortable as they once did. So would you say, one, that was what contributed to you?
Yes, I would actually say that was the main thing, because just to give you a little example of how big of an impact environment can have, in my home country, the comb over, it was seen as a very cool haircut. If you had the comb over, then you were seen as a very stable-headed individual.
Got it.
But by the time I moved into...
And this is in Bangladesh?
Yes, in Bangladesh. Okay. By the time I moved into the US, the comb over, like the other kids in my class, they were like cracking up on it, because they were like, yo, that's the same haircut my dad has. My grandpa has that haircut. So it just goes on to show you that different environments, the cultures are so different that it can impact your personality. And it definitely had an impact on mine.
So what's crazy about that is when you're a kid, those are the toughest times to try to navigate and figure out who exactly that you are. Because when people are saying, oh, my grandpa has that haircut or my uncle has that haircut, whatever it might be, that's very tough to try to decipher and have a strong mind to say, hey, no, this is okay. This is who I am. So talk to me about, how did you start to be comfortable in your own skin? Was that something that, you ran away from, or was that something that you kind of found another avenue or lane to be able to say, no, okay, I can still persevere through this? Because that's almost like social bullying.
Yeah. So around that time, like, it was one of those things where it was cool because my brother was going through the same thing too. So I had him, and he just like, I was like, yo, is the comb over seen as a weird haircut for your class too? He's like, yeah, for me too. Right? Oh, it's not just for you then. So having my brother there was always helpful. And overall, I think eventually what happened was I started to adjust, I started to adapt, and I'm like, okay, so it's time to go from being just a Bengali to a Bengali American now. And that's when the whole transition process began. And the more that I started to adapt, the more friends that I was able to develop. So that was right there, like the moment of change is what sparked a change internally as well, to develop the personality, to see how I could change my accent. But it never fully goes away. It's sort of just something that you learn to embrace as well.
So in there, what I love about it is you still kept your heritage, right? It sounded to me like that you had a lot of pride in that, because you said from going from just a Bengali to now a Bengali American, but you still kept that Bengali at the beginning of that. So how much of your strong heritage did play a part in that, would you say? Like, was your family very, very strong and prideful in where they came from, or was it a big transition of trying to fit into the American culture?
No, they're definitely very prideful in where they came from, and they still are to this day, which helps me, definitely have perspective of the Eastern world. And being someone that lives in the Western world, I now have the perspective of two different worlds, which helps me in the business as well, because a lot of my clients are from different parts of the world. And as you can tell from this podcast that you currently have, I'm sure you work with people from different areas of the world as well, where due to the rise in technology, our world has become so much smaller. So having that sort of perspective of different cultures and how they operate allow for communication skills to be enhanced so much more.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I love that fact that you said that, because obviously in the world that like we live in right now, Zoom calls are booming. That's what, yes. For anybody that's wondering, that's what we record on is Zoom. And for a lot of people, they're being embraced to a culture, right, of the online world that they've never experienced before. If you're only used to going to a 9-to-5, you're only used to seeing the same people. Now, all of a sudden, you got to hop on these calls, whether you're in a different focus group and you're interacting with people face to face. That's a whole nother thing. So that kind of is a perfect segue into how, for a lot of people, they have a fear of not only public speaking, but really going out there and being an extrovert when they've told themselves over many years that they're introverted. So talk to me about was Toastmasters the first thing that you found, or did Toastmasters just help you to elevate your game? What was the first thing that you started to see results in that you were like, listen, I can transition from being that awkward engineer to really being more of an extroverted and a relationship builder?
So that's a great question, and I have a funny story for that. So Toastmasters was my first ever gateway into, communication skills can be enhanced. But to even go more specific, there's a section in Toastmasters called Table Topics. And Table Topics for your viewers is the impromptu section of Toastmasters. So you basically get called on stage, they give you a random topic, and you have to develop the speech right there and then. And at first, I'm like, no way in heck am I going to be able to do that? Because, I mean, if you think about it, I can't even speak in the first place. How am I going to just think of something on top of the head like that? So the first time I ever got called on stage, I completely choked, completely bombed, didn't say one single word. And that alone was enough to take me out of public speaking for, I would say, a couple of months.
Wow.
But eventually I was like, all right, Armani, you gotta go back in there, face your demons. So I go back in, and this time I get called up for Table Topics again. And this time, just without any form of thinking, I just start going. And there it is, a speech developed in on the fly that's for 1 to 2 minutes. And that's like the first day I woke up once again, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, we can do this if we stop thinking so much. And I understand that's one of the biggest problems for heavily introverted people. That's that they do think a lot. The energy that they feel goes up into their heads. And one of the biggest factors of communication skills is to surprisingly tune out the thoughts just a little bit more, become more aware of the moment, and allow the creative energy to flow. And that's one of the biggest things that I work with clients, where it comes down to just thinking less, not more.
Got it. And that's so powerful that you say that. One of my mentors and one of my good buddies, he has this saying that he always says, and he's like, if you're in your head, you're losing bread, right? Like you're losing money, you're losing opportunity. If you're in your head, you're losing bread. And I think that myself included, I've struggled with that of overthinking, right? It causes you because you're so, I don't even want to say afraid, but our whole lives, we've been taught that we want to make the right decision, right? We teach our kids this, make the right decision, make a smart decision, make an educated decision. But sometimes you come between a fork in a road and you don't know which one is the educated or the smart decision. Mm-hmm. And so then you start to just keep thinking it. You're trying to run every scenario in your head rather than just taking away, going 10 steps into that path and saying, hey, this doesn't look right. Let me backtrack and then go to the other route. But how do you, give me some steps or give me some practical tips on what can people do to suppress that voice in their head?
So one of the best tips that I have is communication skills via leveraging technology. Because a lot of people, when they are first getting introduced to the world of technology, they're like, oh, wait, this is bad. This is ruining modern day society. While we're seeing right now with this whole pandemic going on that technology is coming in clutch to keep certain semblances of society functioning, just like how we're able to conduct this interview right now. So what I recommend to stop thinking so much is to use technology to practice. One thing that I recommend is recording yourself talking about a topic and starting a private YouTube channel. The reason why I recommend starting a YouTube channel is because it holds you accountable to record videos and to upload the videos so you can watch yourself via third-party perspective. We're living in a really good time right now because let's say centuries beforehand, guys like Socrates, Aristotle, they were amazing public speakers, but they didn't have the luxury of watching themselves speaking. That right there would have been considered voodoo stuff. Wait, what? There's no way I could watch myself. Well, nowadays, we're able to see digital versions of ourselves to bring awareness. And once we have awareness in how we're speaking, how we're talking, we tend to think less and less and less. For example, I'm sure when you were first starting off podcasting, you had to think like, well, how do I podcast? How do I do this? How do I do that? Because it was a new act. Mm-hmm. But then you started podcasting, you built experience, and I'm sure you watch a lot of your episodes back. I don't know how the process works, but now you have comfortability. So for someone who's overthinking a lot, I recommend leveraging technology, starting a YouTube channel, a podcast, something, getting comfortable with hearing your thoughts, and then the thoughts start to melt away and you start doing because you're starting to become a new person.
Wow. I love that. Now, here's the thing though, because there's somebody out there that's listening that they hate the thought of seeing their voice or their face on camera, or they hate the sound of their voice. So how do they, because yes, it's like, okay, you want me to publish? There's no way. Even if I publish, I never want to see it again. Right. So how do you get over that fear of going in? And is there any tips that you might have for being able to be comfortable enough to watch yourself and not feel like you just made a complete fool out of yourself?
So what I recommend is expecting that from the get-go. Everyone that I've personally worked with and every person out there that hears their voice for the first time, their reaction is this: no way do I sound like that. Do I really sound like that? Oh my God, no. And the reason why is because the way that we're currently hearing our voice, it's a lot different than how we really sound, because our vocal patterns are going like this. While when we hear it recorded for the first time, our ego is detached from it. So I would recommend that people expect that from the get-go. Look, before you click play, what's going to happen is you're going to hear a voice that you don't even recognize, or say that they go the video route. Once you click play, you're going to seem a lot more stiff than you imagined yourself. And once they have that expectancy, that's when they sort of calm down. The problem is when they're not expecting it and they get hit in the face. They're like, what? But if you tell someone, look, everyone goes through this. It's sort of like when you're driving for the first time and you think from the very get-go, oh, I'm going to be a great driver. I'll be on the highway. But that's not the case. So we understand that, no, we're going to be very choppy. We're probably going to smash the accelerator, make a fool of ourselves the first time, and we're going to reverse engineer until we know how to drive. It's the same thing with communication. At first, we're going to be very, very bumpy, and it's going to keep getting easier, easier, easier. Unnecessary movements will melt away, and the authenticity is going to shine.
Wow. I love that. And I love the fact that you talked about setting the right expectation. And that car analogy is very, very good. But that's something that we never do. We never set, especially with ourselves, because I think I just did an episode, not I think, but I know I just did an episode, and it was talking about that we have to be truthful with ourselves, right? And that's the hardest thing to do, because no one's there to hold you accountable besides yourself. Right. Yeah. So if you don't say, listen, okay, I understand that this first episode is not going to go my way, but I know by I'm going to give it to episode 5. If by episode 5, I do not feel like I've gained any progress, then I'll maybe look at another lane or at another avenue. I would even argue to say 5 episodes is definitely not enough. But
like 10 or so, yeah.
Just to give yourself a little bit, because you're going to start to hear a couple of things. Maybe your intro is just that much better. Right? Or maybe it's your exit where you're saying, hey guys, if you got anything from this, make sure that you like it. There's so many things, but you just have to find some nuggets. But more importantly, make sure you set the right expectation. And that's with anything in life. I think we do a good job of setting the right expectation with other people, especially if they're clients of ours, but we don't do a very good job of setting the right expectation with ourselves.
That's so true, because when we're talking to someone else, we're like, come on, man, it's only the first 2 episodes. You're definitely going to get better. Then they're like, all right, well, what about you start one? You're like, oh, wait a minute, And that's how I was as well, because when I first started public speaking, I'm starting to compare myself to veteran Toastmasters who've been doing it for years. And I'm like, well, why are they so smooth? How come their voice is so nice? And I'm all very stiff and stuff. And that's when they're saying, look, I've been doing this for years, and you're just starting off. So I definitely think that's one of the biggest factors, having that patience to be understanding from the get-go, collect the data, and then reverse from there.
I love it. Now, talk to me, because you help a lot of people, not only with not only with communication, but also with public speaking. And so for you, what was that first thing that you did that helped you be able to gain your first speaking engagement? Because a lot of people, they want to get out there and they want to start public speaking as well, but they don't even know where to get started, even if they have a good communication style. So is there anything that you teach people on how they can really start to turn it into a speaking business? Because I think a lot of people, and the reason why I ask that is because a lot of people coming out of this pandemic, they're going to have so many different aha moments that they've learned over these next 30 days, 60 days, however long before it all clears up. And they're going to want to share it with the world. well, how do they get that message out there, even if they feel like they have good communication now?
Great question. I think one of the biggest things to do from the very beginning is have speech topics ahead of time. And what happens is that you always discover different speech topics via podcast episodes like this, writing, journaling, especially during this moment when more people have time to themselves. You'll be able to develop different speech topics. And from there, to get speaking engagements, I recommend being very proactive at first. Reach out to local masterminds in your area. A great tool for that is Meetup, or just go on Facebook groups and say, hey, I'm a new speaker. I'm willing to do the event for free. Because in the very beginning stages, you want to have some film. You want to have some proof, like basically a portfolio that you're building off your speaking experience. The beauty of our generation is we can record the speeches. We could put it up on YouTube. YouTube, for example, is a speaker's best friend nowadays, because a lot of people that are booking you, they're just going to go on your YouTube beforehand and just see what they're dealing with. So what I recommend right now for your viewers is to definitely keep on looking for different content material in this moment. And once everything is up and rising again, be proactive, hit these people up, let them know that you're a go-getter. And from there, later on, once you have experience, more people are going to reach out to you, because that's the beauty of word of mouth. People are going to say, hey, did you watch Casanova? I mean, he's a crazy talker. He's very charismatic, etc. Oh, you know what? I should hire him. I should get him for the upcoming event that I have. So it's all about experience.
I love it. Now, you talked about in the beginning finding a couple speaking topics. What's one tip, or like how can someone know, one, if they have a valuable speaking topic, and two, if they have something that someone else will pay for, which are two different things. If it's valuable, but no one else really wants to hear it, right, then that doesn't really matter, or vice versa. So is there anything that you can tell for someone that is looking to figure out what are their speech topics that they should be honing in on?
Mm-hmm. So I recommend, and this is very counterintuitive advice, I recommend starting off with yourself. Ask yourself, what is it that you truly enjoy? Or what do you like having fun with? For me, it's communication skills. So in the beginning stages, I had no clue that this was actually going to provide value to people. I'm basically just sharing my experiences, and I'm sharing practical insights that I've personally been through. And that's when other people are like, wait a minute, this is pretty cool. I want to learn about it. And for you, it's effortless because you're just doing what's fun for you. But other people are seeing value in it. Same with you, for example. I'm pretty sure that you enjoy podcasting, doing these interviews. And there's a lot of people that want to get into that world. Like, how do I start a podcast? How do I do these interviews? But what's seamless for you right now is actually a journey for someone else. So what I recommend is, before focusing on what you could provide value on others, see what it is that you are already good at or you want to get great at. And from there, there's always going to be a little niche for you. The thing with nowadays is there's so many hyper-targeted topics. I saw recently that there was this Harry Potter book number 4 fan club. I'm like, Harry Potter book number 4, like the Goblet of Fire? For them, like that's their favorite book, and they're just sharing insights on it. And now they're just developing an audience as a byproduct. So that's one of the best ways where you can be a public speaker, but you're having fun in the process. So you last long run, and you'll always have content material.
Man, that's value right there. I hope somebody's listening and they're taking action on that, because that's huge. Figuring out, again, what are you already good at? I think you said it best when you said, what comes easy for you is a struggle for some other people. And those are things that we never really think about.
Or hypothetically, let's say something that just you're terrified of right now. Now you have that emotional fire to take care of business. Like for me, I did not ever think that I'd be teaching other people public speaking because I was that terrified of it. And that right there was enough fuel to get started. And when you get your first few speeches and you conquer a fear, now you're even more committed to it. You see? So it could be something that you like love, or it could be something that you're terrified of. But in either case, there's emotional fuel behind it. It's one of these things that are very difficult to think, but when you have the emotion behind it, it's something that you just commit to. And other people can't catch up because you're operating with a different motive at this point.
Yeah, you're operating on purpose.
Purpose. There we go. Yep.
I love it. I love it. So talk to me about you have it going right now. You've been able to conquer. Tell me, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned along your journey of trying to conquer public speaking and coming from introverted to extroverted to now being an expert on communication? What's your biggest lesson through all of this?
Great question. I think one of the biggest lessons that I personally learned is that every audience is different. And what I mean by that is sometimes a speech will work great with a certain audience, and certain times they'll like it, but they won't really feel it like that. And this is great because this forces a public speaker to learn about different elements of speaking, which comes down to psychology, emotional intelligence, how to deal with people, social skills, etc. So it starts helping you see past the speech in itself and delve deeper into the world of people. It's sort of like business. A lot of people at first, they just think about making the money, but later on, they start delving deeper and realize every business is just human connections and there are transactions involved, but at the core level of it all, it's just human connections. And that's one of the biggest things that I've been able to learn about public speaking, where at first I was putting a lot of focus on me. I was like, I hope my speech is really good so the audience likes me. But later on, the perspective flipped, where I'm trying to make sure that I'm connecting with the audience and catering a speech around that.
Got it. Wow. I love it. I love it. Talk to me about what's the biggest mistake that you made early on that you wish you would have known how to conquer back then? Because a lot of people, the reason why I ask this is because I know obviously a lot of people hear success, 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 but other people right now, they're looking for ways that they can shorten up their learning curve. They're looking for ways that they can avoid the pitfalls that we've already went down. So that's why I asked, what's one of those things that if you could teach a new speaker right now, what's something that they should be looking out for that can help save them time, energy, or even, not getting back into the race? Luckily you did after you bombed that first one, but for some other people, they might not ever get back in.
Yes, and if they hypothetically did bomb a speech, I recommend them having the perspective to know that most people in Toastmasters, if you ask them how they started, they actually started off with a choke job where they didn't say anything their first speech, and that allowed them to keep going. But just to answer your question, one of the biggest advice that I would give is have fun. Don't compete too much. That was one of my biggest problems in the beginning stages, where I would keep thinking, well, why is this guy doing so well? Well, why is this guy doing better? This guy. And it's because I was focusing too much on myself. While after speaking at least 5 to 8 speeches, you realize that you are only competing against you. And this opens up your mind and it allows you to start appreciating these different people, where you start seeing how, wow, this guy talks in such a unique way that I wasn't even considering before. This lady has such a unique voice, the way that she's able to play with her tonalities. And you start operating in a completely different way when you realize that public speaking is just an expression of your personality. It's not you trying to compete with other people, which I think holds a lot of people back in the beginning stages. They're thinking of it more as an ego trip. And if you can bypass that stage, you'll save so much time. I'm talking like months of time. If you're just saying, everyone has their own gifts, let me maximize mine and see what I can learn from other people so I can maximize more of my gifts.
I love it. I love it, man. Was there ever a book or a podcast that helped you accelerate your communication skills?
Well, once I began the public speaking journey, eventually a mentor was presented to me. His name is Joe Yazbeck. I highly recommend checking out his book called No Fear Speaking, because before then I was a very raw public speaker. I was gaining a lot of real life experience, but his book, it's able to encapsulate a lot of those experiences into concepts So now you have tools that you can use for later on. So if any of your viewers are looking for a good public speaking book, it's called No Fear Speaking. I think it has most of what you need to get set up and started.
Cool. And we'll drop the link in the show notes for that book. But yeah, no, that's phenomenal. Talk to me about what's the one thing that you're looking to accomplish here in the next 6 to 12 months that you think that we could support you on?
For sure. One of the main things I'm trying to do right now is to keep my YouTube channel growing. I think video is so powerful, especially when you can see someone, hear their voice. You're getting a lot of rapid information. So one of my main goals for this year is to continue to grow my YouTube channel and keep the other vehicles growing as well. I try to delve a little bit into all the communication worlds in the realm of media. So I have a blog, Twitter, email list, etc. And the main goal for the next 6 to 12 months is to keep the ArmaniTalks brand growing, just so I can keep on helping more entrepreneurs develop their communication skills.
Got it. And talk to me about that, because that's a dope name. I love it. Talk to me about ArmaniTalks. Where did that come from?
Yes. So growing up, a lot of people couldn't say my name once I moved to the US. They'd be like, Armando? I was like, no, it's Arman. They're like, I can't say that. I'm like, Armani without the I. Like, oh, Arman. I was like, yeah, there we go. But I'd always have to say Armani without the I. So eventually a lot of people just called me Armani. And the reason that I use talks is because it's just very simple and to the point, and it talks about the heart of the ArmaniTalks brand. Initially it was going to be Armani Speaks, but something about that just didn't resonate. So I kept it with ArmaniTalks, and overall it gives people an idea of the brand being about communication skills.
I love it, man. Now, hey, I'm sure that there's somebody out there right now that is super inspired. They love your journey of where you came from, where you are now, and how you're giving back to other people to teach them how they can start their own journey similar to yours. But they still have that little voice in their head, one that's telling them that they're not strong enough, maybe they're not smart enough, or they just don't have enough resources. What's the one thing that you say to that person to get them to just take action?
I would recommend starting off with the smallest amount that you possibly can is better than not starting off at all. For example, when I first started my Twitter account, I had never tweeted before then. It was just one of my friends who was saying, Armani, I think you'll be better on Twitter than Instagram. I was like, but I've never tweeted before. And his advice was, just do one tweet and see what happens. And since then, that one tweet has turned into over 40,000. And it just takes that one little step in the right direction that can change everything else. So I recommend to that person, you don't have to build this mega empire out of the blue moon. Just take that small little step, the smallest that you possibly can, and it'll win yourself over. And eventually that little seed is going to grow into something much bigger.
I love it, man. For anybody who is still wanting to stay connected with you, where can they find you at?
For sure. So they could find me at ArmaniTalks.com. That's going to lead them towards my podcast, YouTube, my book, Level Up Mentality, and much more. And I recommend just starting off there, and you'll get familiarized with me, hear my story, and all of that above.
Love it. Well, we'll drop the links in the show notes. Be sure to check those out. But we want to say thank you for coming in and teaching our people, right? We all want to be able to be successful. We all want to have more impact, more influence, and hopefully build more income along the way. And I think that you've given some valuable tips today for everybody to be able to implement just one thing that can help with all three of those. So thank you again. Remember, Dream Nation, in the dream we trust, but as he said already, you must take action. Otherwise, it'll only merely be a fantasy. Until the next time, we're out, my man. Thank you for joining us.
I appreciate you for having me on, bro.
Absolutely. That's the episode for today. Let me know if you got any value out of this, if you liked anything about it. Reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter, any of the social media networks, and of course, leave me a review, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you're hearing this at. I would love to have a review to show, what you're getting out of this. Is there anything that I could do better? Is there any way that I can add more value to you? So hopefully you all take some action today. That's my show. I love you all. Be great. But remember, we must take action.